Greetings, clarinetists. It's audition month at ICA. This is the time of year where many are gearing up for school ensemble auditions, and recent graduates are looking to take their first auditions for jobs. This is also the time of year where job auditions start opening up again, especially after the lockdown, with more and more ensembles beginning to play concert seasons yet again. One of the largest employers of musicians out there is the US military, so I was curious about the process to audition into one of the premier bands. I sat down with Master Sergeant Sara Reese to ask her about auditioning into one of the premier bands and to learn about good preparation practices leading up to and on the day of the audition. She had so much wonderful advice and great insight into the process, both from the perspective as an auditionee and also behind the scenes on a panel. This was really informative, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Sarah. I am really excited to introduce to everyone Master Sergeant Sara Reese, who is in the Air Force Band. And we're going to be talking about military auditions for audition month for the ICA. So thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. So let's just start off with a little bit of an introduction. I want to clear some space for you to introduce yourself. So can you just tell me a little bit about how long you've been with the Air Force Band, a little bit about your experience, kind of what you love about it, and why should people audition?
Sure. So I've been in the Air Force Band 10 years now. Went by fast. 10 years. I've been playing with the concert band here in the Air Force Band. My experience has been awesome. It's, a fantastic group of musicians. I mean, just top notch from all across the band. So we have different flights that I work with, and a flight is an ensemble, a small ensemble. So from the singers to the strings to the airmen of note or jazz band, and then back around to the concert band, just amazing musicians and people to work with. Yeah, and you asked how my favorite experiences with the band, or
Yeah, what are some things? I mean, you answered what you love about it, working with the level of talent. Are there any reasons or pluses that maybe people should think about when considering audition?
oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously working with the great musicians, top level, and but the job stability is fantastic, as you know, as many people know. The military, you have all the lovely job perks, and stability is something that's really important, I think, in our field. It's nice to know that you'll be taken care of, and you'll have a regular paycheck. It's something not to forget about when you're considering these jobs. Um, yeah, and a lot of travel comes with the job. I really enjoy that part. The concert band travels at least twice a year. We go on tour and throughout the country, um, and that's a blast. And I think people should definitely keep in mind the military band career. It's rewarding in a lot of different ways you really had maybe hadn't thought of, as far as meeting veterans and representing the armed forces. And it's just also just super fulfilling to work with great musicians and explore wind band literature, and you can branch out. You can also form chamber groups and spend a lot of time on that. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, in the bands.
Great. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Job security is super important.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, somebody has decided that they'd like to audition, and I know that every premier band has a different kind of set of protocols. But what are some things that, in general, military bands ask of people auditioning for them, and a little bit about, you know, like what to expect as far as getting the first packet and the preparation.
Sure. Yeah, so like you said, the different premier bands handle it a little differently. I think for us right now, we do have a pre-screening round. So you'll be asked to send in a tape of a few excerpts and maybe Mozart. And the excerpts could be a variety of orchestral works as well as band literature, like um, particularly isolated or challenging or popular band excerpts for clarinet. So for us, once you get past that round, you'll be invited in, and then it pretty much plays out like orchestra audition. So you have your group room to warm up in, and you're moved along to an individual room to warm up in. You're brought into the audition. It's blind. It's carpeted. We pretty much handle it like you're auditioning for any orchestra. And that's on purpose because it's the same quality of musicians. It's creating a level playing field for everybody. Just come in with their prepared excerpts and solos and sit down. So that's how I would, yeah, expect an audition to run for most of the premier bands.
Great. And so when someone is preparing, they've gotten the excerpts. What are some things that they really need to be thinking about? I know you drew parallel between the orchestra auditions, but maybe in your own audition, what were exercises you did to prepare for, to really be prepared for that audition?
So with military band auditions, I feel like there might even be more technical excerpts because as a clarinetist in a band, you're a section violin player. You're just like going for it. Um, so the excerpt that comes to mind that I had to play for my audition was Pineapple Pole. So that excerpt, tons of tonguing, nowhere to breathe. So very technical. I feel like maybe in military bands time is just super important because as a clarinetist in a band, once again, you're playing with a lot of people at the same time, so you need to be accurate rhythmically and display that good time and that you can kind of be trusted to keep up. So I would prepare just pretty much like any excerpt, but I would taking that excerpt, for example, Pineapple, I would just start very slowly with the metronome subdivided out, be unbelievably accurate with the rhythm, and then move it up, faster and faster until you can play cleanly at the tempo. Listen, I would say listen to a lot of recordings of military bands. Um, Listen to both, listen to military bands and orchestras playing the same pieces. Like just have it all in your ear, and that way when day of the audition, if someone wants it faster or slower, you're not surprised.
So, what are some of the biggest pitfalls you think that when clarinetists are preparing for these auditions? Where do things go wrong, or what might they do to underprepare?
um I would say it's usually pretty obvious in an audition when someone hasn't really recorded themselves and listened back, and it usually comes down to the time. Every judge, I've been on a couple panels, is in the tape round or in the live round, they're tapping their finger, and you can usually tell when someone doesn't have that internal rhythm. And that's something I think with practice, but also in listening to yourself in recordings, you can really notice right away. So I think that could be a common pitfall, just not recording yourself and listening objectively. Listen like you're listening to somebody else, and tap your finger and close your eyes and think about um, that person, being yourself. And I think that was really helpful for me in preparing.
Great. I know personally, I have auditioned a few times for military bands. And I remember getting to the sight reading section. And when I got feedback about it, one of the things that they said was it was rhythmically accurate and good, but they wished it were faster. Can you tell me a little bit about what they're looking for in this sight reading? And then also, how do you prepare for that sight reading?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the sight reading. That's pretty unique to the military bands, I would say. I haven't really come across that in the orchestra auditions. Um, yeah, so from actually the first time I auditioned for the Air Force band, I got to the final two, and I didn't make it. I didn't make it. I was in the final round, and they hired two people. It wasn't me. And one of the comments I got was, let's just work more on your sight reading. You know, live with live with your metronome, and just work on the sight reading. And so when I came back, whenever that was after, um, I felt more prepared because I took the time. I just grabbed random books from my clarinet studio, and I sight read every single day. And I would go back and check the tempos that were marked, and see how my guess of the tempo was and how close I was. And it would get better eventually, but it takes time. So just, I think that's the biggest difference with military band auditions is you have to carve out that time to practice sight reading and just do it every single day.
And probably record yourself as well so that you know how the sight reading went.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, and know how it went, and you can listen back with the metronome and see like, oh, how close was I to that given tempo. Um, yeah, it's an interesting thing to have to practice, but it's really good for you in the long run, also.
So when you pass through the first round, I'm just going to kind of jump ahead to this since it kind of came up. But you jump through the first round. What is the second round like as far as differences from the first round?
I'm trying to remember back. So I think for me, there were excerpts not asked for in the first round. Um, so there were those excerpts. Maybe they were more technically difficult, or maybe it was more musical. They're just like a different set of excerpts. And then maybe some old excerpts where they're like, I want, the panel wanted to hear everybody do those all again for reference or something. So for me, what it really came down to was, okay, I made that first cut. And so you can kind of relax a little bit and breathe, because that's like the hardest thing to get through is like the wave of people. And then you're like, okay, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to remember to be musical and remember to breathe. And then, trust yourself that you made it to the next round, trust your instincts. And I think that's really the biggest thing, because you've put in all the preparation to that point.
So, what do you think is, I mean, everybody is different, but you say putting in the preparation. What should the average clarinetist who makes it in expect as far as practice time, and for how long before the audition would you say, guesstimate?
Um, Personally, I don't want to feel rushed at the beginning of preparation. So I get the packet of music um, 2 months out, maybe something like that, at least. But you don't want to feel rushed. You want to be able to organize your excerpts. You want to be able to get all your reference recordings all together, and just live with everything. So, put in your, I don't know, 3-4 hours a day of practice, but go through your normal practice routine. So start with your warm up, do your etudes. Don't forget all that other good stuff. Like, there's a reason we've been doing those for years. And then, I mean, maybe you have a solo you're also working on, but then you have your excerpt time. So you don't want to hit it too hard and only do the excerpts. Keep doing your routine, but start living with the excerpts. And then for me, I start recording as soon as I'm feeling pretty comfortable getting through all the excerpts. I start recording and listening. And then by the time 2 weeks out comes, um, I'm I'm quizzing myself in excerpts in different orders, etc. But I'm actually not using my metronome anymore. 2 weeks out, that I'm just, maybe I work on something, I'll double check the metronome, but then turn it off. And because you, at that point, you need to trust yourself. You need to be audition ready 2 weeks out. Playing for people, although I don't play for people less than 2 weeks out, because you don't want all the different opinions creeping in. You want to gain their opinions. And then 2 weeks out, you're just kind of running the audition, checking in here and there, getting the reads ready.
Yeah, that's great advice. Do you have any advice for it's the day of the audition, you've woken up, kind of for people, how do you get through the day? Because I know, at least in my experience, maybe it's changed. I remember getting there and like finding places, and then they were like measuring me and weighing me, which is really not, it doesn't happen in orchestra auditions. Can you talk a little bit about like the mindset you need for the day of the audition?
So it does vary by band. So I can't speak for the other bands, but we don't do the weigh-ins anymore here. So personally, for the Air Force band, we show up, sign in, go to your room to warm up. So it's just like an orchestra audition. Obviously, you want to give yourself lots of time, especially if you're coming to DC. Plan on doubling your commute time, with the traffic, and especially if it's early in the morning. Also getting through the gate, there's security issues, and you should be on a list, but you might not be. So much, give yourself so much time. And if you get to the building super early, just chill in your car, listen to a podcast, take some deep breaths, drink some water, go to the Starbucks, just, you want to be comfortable and early. And then, when you're thinking you maybe an hour or so from your audition, or then go in, get out of your car, and check in. But as far as the day of, at least with our band, there's nothing really out of the ordinary except maybe the traffic getting on base.
Yeah, and security.
Yeah, yeah. Be careful. Make sure, yeah, you're all set with that.
Um, so one of the things, do they give you an audition time? I know that sometimes they, or should you plan on a really long day and maybe bring snacks? Like, what is the procedure now with that?
For us, I believe you're given a block ahead of time. So you are in the 9 o'clock block, or whatever. You're in the 1 o'clock block. So that means you're going to play in that hour, and they'll listen to maybe 6 people in that hour. So you could play at 9, you could play at 9:50. So I would get there at 8 in that situation. Maybe other bands have like more of a cattle call. I can't speak to their process right now. I'm not sure. But for us, it depends on how many people are invited to the audition, but it could still be a very long day. Even if you're given a block of time, you could advance. And for us, the second round is after lunch. So usually starts up about 1 or so. And then if you advance some more, maybe you're playing in the next round at 4. So theoretically, it could be an all-day event if you're in the first block and you make it to the finals. I think that was the case for me, actually. I remember leaving base at like 6 p.m. And it was just absolutely zonked, so tired. So bring all the snacks, bring all the water, bring something to read or play a game on your phone or whatever. Just you want to be able to relax and have food and not stress about finding food. Yeah, I would say prepare for a long day, because it could happen, and that'd be a good thing.
Yeah, I think we had as a guest here somebody from the Marine band, and they still do cattle calls. And just for clarification, that just means you basically show up. And so you don't know if there's like 50 or 100 people that are going to be there.
That was my experience. I guess 10, 11 years when I auditioned from the Marine band as well. And yeah, a little different than how we do it, but not super different from how some orchestras do it. So it's, all par for the course in a way.
How many rounds is fairly typical, and what does the very final round look like?
For us, usually 3 rounds, sometimes 4. The final round, the screen comes down. You are introduced not as a number or letter. You're introduced as yourself, obviously. And the main difference in the final round is you see the panel sees you. And for us, this is when we have our section playing as in you probably play with one or two other people. Sometimes it's just a duet with another clarinetist that you've prepared ahead of time, as was in the packet. Sometimes it's with maybe a couple bassoons, or it's an extra, it depends, on the packet. But you definitely should expect to play with somebody else from the band in that final round, and possibly sight read. You should be prepared to sight read in all the rounds, I would say.
What is the panel looking for when you are playing with the section playing?
They're looking for if you can, pick up on the cues, you can play in tune, you obviously have like a good grasp of the excerpt, like how much give and take should happen. And the person playing with you should know all of these things too. And so it's about communication and adjusting. So if you guys start playing and you're, 20 cent sharp, you should be able to adjust pretty quickly, and listen and communicate. Just be, flexible, I would say, and show that you can be flexible.
For young clarinetists who are, wanting to get into the military band that maybe don't have as much ensemble playing experience, did you prepare at all for that kind of section playing and that kind of adjustment? Or would you recommend someone doing that?
I would say at the very least, play some duets with some of your friends, colleagues. I mean, hopefully you've been playing in band here and there or orchestra, so you have an idea. But if not, yeah, just get together once a week in your preparations with a friend, and it doesn't have to be clarinet, and just play some duets that you've worked on a little bit. You don't have to stress out about it, but being able to communicate, practice your cues, practice watching their cues. Because sometimes, I'll see auditions and our section, player will be showing what they're doing, and the person auditioning like isn't paying attention at all. So, start thinking about those things in your preparation as well.
That's great advice. Can you think of what some, like maybe just from being on the panel, what are some of the biggest pitfalls, things that go wrong that is either in the control of the clarinetist or completely out of control of the clarinetist that you can think of, and maybe some mitigation for that?
Um, Probably letting the nerves, everybody has nerves. Like if someone says they're not nervous, they're not telling the truth. Like letting the nerves overtake you. So letting the nerves cause you to start just rushing and losing your sense of time that you worked on. So I would say that just like deep breathing, trusting yourself. Usually what happens is people will just start to rush because their heart's racing, and myself included. Like that's very normal. So working on that, that's why listening yourself in recordings is so important, and playing for peers is so important. Get that heart rate up, listen back, and you're gonna hear like, oh, well, when I get nervous, I like totally rush. I rushed right through that Mozart. Like, um, and as far as other pitfalls, I would say like being too conservative, um, usually because of nerves, but people let me hold back too much. So don't be afraid to be expressive. We, even though we're like a military band, we want people who are musical still. Of course, we want the best musicians, the most expressive musicians. So within time and of course in style, don't be afraid to play out. Like you want to stand out in that first round. You don't want to be just another person playing Mozart with no expression. So yeah, we want to hear your musicality as well. So don't be afraid to do that.
Have you ever heard of anybody having any equipment failures, and are the bands kind of sympathetic to that?
Oh yeah, there's been some things over the years. Yeah, you know, um, spit bubbles, or maybe a wrong clarinet was grabbed. And we're sympathetic to that, of course. We'll always, just try that again. It's not like you're out. We're human. You're human. So, if it's a repeat issue and something, really big, I don't know. We'll have to take it on a case by case basis. But yeah, we're at the end of the day, we're all human, and we're like rooting for you, on the panel.
Yeah, I think people don't remember that the panel wants you to succeed.
Yeah, for sure. Every person who comes in are like, all right, let's hear it. We're excited, and um, to hear their interpretation or what they have to bring. And so, yeah, it's not like us versus them. Yeah, we're on your side.
So okay, somebody has come auditioned, they have done all of this wonderful preparation, they've gotten through all of the rounds, and they are offered a job. What are the next steps? What is that like?
Right. So, typically at that point, for me, I had to, I went upstairs and I met the colonel. If he isn't even in the round, usually he's in that final round. So you'll meet the leadership. Um, you'll meet the whole panel. You'll talk, and so then at that point, you will be given the instructions to go and enlist, essentially. So for the Air Force Band, that's when you're given all your paperwork. You're to contact your local recruiter and go through all those steps. There's a lot of steps. Go through the medical thing, make sure you're medically cleared to go. And then maybe a few months later, if everything goes well, which usually does, then you go basic training and spend, I think it's 6 or 8 weeks, or it changes a little bit. It was 8.5 for me at basic training. And then for me, so after the whole process started, I won my job in February and I arrived to the band building in August. So that was my timeline. It can vary. COVID could change things, but that can vary. It can take longer or shorter. So it just depends.
That's a great point. There's a lot more in the hiring process of military bands than say an orchestra.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, a lot stacks and stacks of paperwork in between your audition day and when you arrive and have your first rehearsal.
So uh, maybe some of the clarinetists want to audition, but they're worried about that hiring process and mainly boot camp. Do you have any advice or comforts that you can impart on them?
Sure. I will say this: if you're at all worried about needing a medical waiver or anything like that, you could theoretically go and talk to a recruiter and just feel it out, that situation. You don't want to go through this whole process and then be refused to join because of something in your medical history. So if you want peace of mind, you could do that ahead of time. Um, don't enlist or anything yet. Don't do anything until you win the job, though. Yeah. um, but as far as boot camp goes, I would say for me personally, I started like running, and after I won my job, just did like the couch to 5K program because I really hadn't run much. Did some light push-ups and sit-ups. You don't need to stress over it though. Think about the fact that most people at boot camp come in at 17 or 18. They also have not been exercising regularly. You are working out every single day at boot camp, and you're not expected to do all the things on day one at all. So you have like 8 weeks to be able to pass that first fitness test, and you're probably not going to have a problem because you're doing it every single day. It's just it's an interesting 2.5 months. It's an interesting perspective into military training, and you just sort of get through it, and most people do, no problem. And then at the end of the journey, you have a pretty awesome job, and you can just remember that as like something you had to do, and now you're here.
Yeah, so that kind of brings me to one of my last questions is what is the first year like? What are some of the things that maybe you didn't think about or like the day to day that you just had to kind of get used to or things like elements of the job that you didn't realize were part of the job?
Yeah, so speaking for our band, something I guess I didn't really know was that we yes, we're in the ensembles and we're performing musicians, but we also like run the band. I know it's different with different bands. I think the Marine Band has more of an administrative team, but and I can't speak for the others, but we run our own band. So that was something that I didn't know about. So we perform, but we also um, pass out the music. We run the library, we run marketing, we run operations. That's actually what I currently do. So I'm planning the rehearsals for the concert band and making sure we're all set for concerts and stuff. So there's that going on behind the scenes, and so that adds like a little extra time, but it's something you can take pride in that you're like running this organization, and that's a little different from the orchestras.
Yeah. I always, when I found that out, I thought that was really neat that you all have like
Yeah,
administrative jobs.
I know. Yeah, and and some people like really like it, and you can dig in and kind of even when you retire, like somebody retired recently who did a lot of the marketing work, and they went off and like kind of got a marketing job, and because they had learned so much along the way. And so you can kind of, if you're interested, branch off. Production has been like a really big um, like a big shop this year. So obviously with COVID, everything was online, and so they've really ramped up production, and like people are really enjoying it, and it's like something they want to do as well most of the time. So you can kind of learn a second hobby or career, if you want, if it gives you that opportunity to like kind of dig into maybe something else you're interested in.
And I just a couple more questions and then I'll ask for but I had a few pop in my head. So let's go back to auditioning. Many people don't win a military band the first time. Um, what advice can you give someone who is like, I really want to be in the military band? Um, you know, all of that sounds amazing. I want to do that. I want to be you. And they don't pass their first audition. What is some advice you might give someone about the next time and the next time?
Yeah, first of all, just stick with it. I won my fifth or sixth military band audition, so wasn't my first either. um, it's such a mental experience. Like you can prepare all you want, but you also need to prepare your mental space to audition. It's a separate thing. So yes, practice excerpts, but you have to get in the mindset of an audition and learn how to do that. It's its own skill. So even in the early days of preparing, I am thinking about being in a big hall, in a big space, playing for a panel. Like it's in the back of my mind. I'm visualizing it. I go through my routines with that in mind. Um, and then, show up to your first audition and maybe it doesn't go as well as you thought. Just like, don't be discouraged. You just have to learn that skill now, the skill of taking audition. It's like a totally separate thing.
Yeah, it's really hard to not be discouraged, but I can't think of very many people who have won the first audition they took.
Right. Yeah, that's across the board. Yeah, military or not. Yeah, it's something you have to just like get used to. It's like you can prepare for a recital all you want until you've actually done one. Maybe you made a mistake, but you have to learn how to recover from that mistake. Like that's its own separate skill set. So it's just like one of those interesting things that you have to practice that you didn't even know you needed to practice right away. But repetition is the key. So yeah, take all the auditions, and it's the same as practicing. It's gonna get better.
Yeah, this was really great. Do you have any, final thoughts about military band auditions or preparation? Any advice you'd like to impart?
Um, I guess the biggest thing is give yourself a lot of time to prepare, but just listen, listen, listen to yourself in recordings and live with your metronome by your side. Listen to recordings of yourself, listen to recordings of all kinds of orchestras and bands playing the different music. Make sure you know the band music. I know we've all lived with Beethoven 6 for 20, 30 years, but have you really listened to all of the different versions of Elsa's Procession to the Cathedral, for band, for when, so live with those things as well. Because some people, you can tell they haven't really spent the time to listen to the band excerpts as well. So yeah, just trust your instincts once you get past that first round, and just don't forget to breathe. Yeah.
Wonderful. This has been really great. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and imparting this knowledge. Thank you.
You're welcome. It was a blast.